Greetings, Earthlings, and others. Whoever's here today, whoever was sent here, Nephilim, Anunnakis. What are they else called, Jake? Reptilian. What else, Jake?
It changed. Anunnaki is the one you always forget. You got it, so I don't know.
The Nephilims. What else do they say? All their stuff they say. Well, whoever here is here. Good. I'm so glad you're here. I can barely even speak. That's how overwhelmed I feel. Oh, and as well as animals, my favorite of all souls on this planet, most intelligent, most perfect souls, mostly because they, unlike human beings, don't have to bullshit themselves in order to enjoy life. It's an amazing thing. And, we should watch animals more and be kinder to them. But anyway, welcome to Roseanne Barr podcast.
Oh, you see, my patience is growing thin.
Oh my God, you guys, I'm so excited today. You know how I love to talk to geniuses, people who are, out of the box, aren't trapped in the matrix. I love people with other kind of ideas. And I'm so thrilled today to be talking to somebody who's like an ultra genius. And I'm just going to introduce him like this. And God said, let there be light. And here he is.
And here I am. How you doing, Roseanne?
Good. How are you?
I'm very excited to be with you. I tried to explain to my children who are very young that I'd be speaking to this iconic American comedian and actress. Unfortunately, with no disrespect intended, they didn't know who you were, but I'll make sure to rectify that problem.
I'm telling you, none of these people, the youngsters, know who I am. Well, some of them do, but not a lot. But it's just so great to be able to walk places, you know what I mean, and have a certain sort of anonymity after a long time. So that's cool. But I still, appreciate it when my fans say hi. But it's kind of a different. I want to talk to you about how important, I don't even know how to say it, that mind control is.
Right. Well, so we could talk if you'd like. We could start with The Parasitic Mind, which is a book.
Please.
Yeah. Should we do that?
Yes, I love that book. Yes. Oh,
so I basically argue, Roseanne, that I have faced two great wars in my life. The first great war was going through an actual physical war, the Lebanese Civil War. We were part of the last remaining group of Lebanese Jews that were in Lebanon. Only a few hundred Jews left in Lebanon at the time. And then in the mid-70s, the war broke out. It became impossible to be Jewish. We went through some very difficult times. Fast forward to, 1990s, I finished my PhD. I become a professor. And that's when I faced the second great war in my life, which was the war on reason, the war on science, the war on logic, on common sense. And so what I did in The Parasitic Mind is I tried to come up with a way to explain how could it be that in the 21st century, we could be debating what is a woman, what is a man. There must be some kind of zombification process that can cause otherwise perfectly reasonable people to completely lose it. And so maybe I could explain why I use the parasitic metaphor. Would that be okay?
Mm-hmm.
So in the animal kingdom, there is the field of parasitology, which basically studies how hosts interact with parasites. So for example, a tapeworm can parasitize your intestinal tract, but a neuroparasite is the one that tries to go to your brain, altering your circuitry to suit its interests. So for example, a wood cricket, an actual wood cricket, it detests water. It wants nothing to do with water. But when it is parasitized by a hairworm, the hairworm needs the wood cricket to jump into water in order for it to complete its reproductive cycle. And so it will merrily commit suicide in the service of the reproductive interests of the hairworm. And so that was my epiphany. That was my aha moment. I will now use that framework to argue that human beings can be parasitized by ideological pathogens. And so, what the book does, I go through all of these parasitic ideas, and then hopefully I offer an effective mind vaccine.
And well, MK Ultra mind control, which we've been under in the United States since I was a girl. I mean, I just look around and I get terrified at how well it's worked. And we'll talk about that later because I want to talk about, is there any hope for the United States and Canada where you now live, right?
Yes,
Or are
yeah, go ahead.
or have we been totally Islamicized already? It seems to me that we have become
Uh,
totally Islamicized.
I unfortunately, I want to always be optimistic and give people hope, but I fear that it is getting late. Now, it wouldn't be late, Roseanne, if I saw that the West was open to recognizing the problem and then implementing the right autocorrective procedures. But all I see is people doubling down, hence the topic of
Right.
my next book, which is suicidal empathy, right? So
Oh,
people,
that is the best phrase ever invented for the Western world in 600 years.
do you want me
Thank
to do you want me to describe that?
Yes,
Mhm.
please.
So what I just described earlier with the parasitic mind. So we are both a feeling and thinking animal, right? We have a cognitive system that causes us to think, and we also have an emotional system, right? As an evolutionist, I study both why our brains evolved to think the way they do, but why our emotional system also evolved to feel the way that it does. So for me to completely zombify you, I need to take control both of your thinking ability, hence the parasitic mind, and your emotional system, hence suicidal empathy. Now, empathy is a perfectly noble virtue to have when it is meted out in the right amount at the right time to the right people, right? But when it's gamed such that I care more about 6'4" John who became Linda and now is a girl, and therefore I have to care about her feelings more than about the 100 biological women. That's suicidal empathy. When I
Yeah.
care more about MS-13 gang members
But
than I
also,
care. Go ahead,
I want to say,
please.
but it's so much a part of everything for me because I've been active in women's issues for so long. But empathy is one of the first characteristics anybody will give when they used to discuss the innate qualities of woman.
Right, that women are empathetic.
It's more empathy because she gives children and raises them, right?
Indeed. And so it makes perfect evolutionary sense that as a social species, we invest, to your point, we invest heavily in our children. Of course, women more so than men, but men too are great dads in the
Of
animal
course.
kingdom. So it makes perfect sense that we would have evolved this reflex of being empathetic to others. So, for example, theory of mind, which is the ability of me to put myself in your mind when I am engaging in a meaningful interaction with you, is a perfectly reasonable thing. By the way, autistic children don't have theory of mind. One of the ways that you're able to diagnose a young child is when they fail a theory of mind task. So empathy is a great thing, but as Aristotle taught us thousands of years ago, it's the devil's in the details. As long
Yeah.
as it's in the right amount to the right people in the right context. What the West has done is it has abdicated that sweet spot, and it has completely led to a hyperactive misfiring of our empathy module. And so most of our domestic failures and foreign failures stem from this suicidal empathy. So get ready for the next book, Roseanne.
I can't wait for the next book, but I really want to dabble here for a minute because as a woman, and you know my definition. Have you heard my definition? I said it on Piers and
No,
you've
go
heard
ahead.
it 10 million times. My definition, what is a woman? A woman is me. A woman is somebody whose breasts hang down to her belly and who has, uh, what did I say, Jake?
Prolapsed uterus.
Who has a prolapsed uterus from giving birth to five ungrateful little bastards who've never had to work for anything in their whole lives.
And one of them is with us right here. Yes?
Yes.
But he knows that's a joke. I used to say that to him when he was a wayward teen. However, now he's a lovely father and husband. But anyway, I think that this whole think the whole number of the mind control that they've done, I'll say that I've seen in my lifetime, was the perversion of women's rights and getting women, young girls, these young women, to stand out there cheering for violence and cheering for men in women's bathrooms. I mean, boy, they really messed up everything with that one. They got women to be complete lemmings.
Well, and that's exactly the combination of the 1-2 punch of parasitic thinking and suicidal empathy, right? It's
Right.
hashtag queers for Palestine, right? I mean, I always tell people, I mean, I'm from the region, right? I'm from the Middle East, so I know how the Middle East treats its LGBTQ community. Now,
And we
imagine
all do. Even they do, and they're like all for it.
it's unbelievable,
They
right? I mean,
they think Jewish people going back to farm on land which contains their ascended masters is the most horrifying thought in the world. I don't get it. That is another uh, example of how completely we have been taken over by Islam. Sometimes it's easy to spend just as much time deciding what to make for dinner as you do deciding what to stream. And before you know it, the night's over, you haven't watched anything, and you're eating ramen again. If that sounds familiar, this might be the time to streamline your dinner time with homechef.com.
Yeah, I love this place. We talk about it all the time. We can cook our own food. We can prepare our own food. We can microwave. We can oven bake. They have every kind of food you want delivered to your door. It's easy.
That's right. Users of leading meal kits have rated Home Chef #1 in quality, convenience, value, taste, and recipe ease. For a limited time, Home Chef is offering my listeners 50% off and free shipping for your first box plus free dessert for life. Go to homechef.com/Roseanne. That's homechef.com/Roseanne for 50% off of your first box and free dessert for life. Homechef.com/Roseanne. But you must be an active subscriber to receive your free dessert.
in Montreal, where we emigrated from Lebanon, from 1975 to 1998. And the reason why I mentioned 1998 is because I remember the exact year when I first saw a woman wearing an Islamic veil, and that was in 1998. So the first 23 years of my life in Montreal, Canada, I never saw any Islamic sartorial, stuff. From 1998 to today, Roseanne, I could walk on any street in Montreal, and depending on the neighborhood, between 20 to 50% of the women I come across are veiled. Now, that didn't take 500 years. It took from 1998 till today. So people have a completely wrong temporal sense of how quickly things can change. And so that
And what gets me, another thing that gets me is how they're saying Israel is forcing us to fight their war with Iran. That cracks me up because we, America, did that to Iranian women. We made that happen. I mean, it's just so sick. All
yeah.
of this stuff is driving me crazy.
Have you ever seen the footage of in any Islamic country, let's say before the
Yeah.
Islamic hardliners came, right? You had these Lebanon, where I grew up, I almost never saw a veiled woman. So my first 11 years of my life, I might have seen 10 veiled women in my entire life in Lebanon, whereas now almost everybody is veiled. It's unbelievable.
It's just the stripping away of all women's rights. And they really want to strip away women completely, erase women as, even as a biological sex. And they, at the UN level, they have passed these unbelievable laws that have filtered down even into American insurance companies that use because I look at that, but like a lot of insurance companies that pay for these transgender operations on children and adults who have gender body whatever it's called,
Gender dysphoria.
dysphoria.
Yeah.
Um, they use the term bonus hole instead of vagina. I, that drives me out of my mind. Bonus hole.
Have
What
you
does
heard?
that? What
Have
that
you,
says when you break it down is how a pedophile thinks.
What they prioritize. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, the mouth and the anus, and then the other thing is
It's-
just for babies. But that's the bonus hole.
have you
I
heard the
mean,
term?
complete. We are complete mind controlled slaves in America.
Yeah.
I
Have
can't
you,
stand it.
have you heard the term cervix haver?
Yes, chest feeder.
By the way, some of your viewers, if they follow my work, might know the story, but you may not. So I'll take the time to share it here. I already warned about all this stuff way back in 2002. So this is 23 years ago. I One of my doctoral students had just defended his dissertation, and so we had gone out for a celebratory dinner. Do you know? Have you heard the story before, Roseanne, on anywhere else?
No.
Okay,
Uh-uh.
okay, good. So this is the first time you'll hear it. So this was 2002. Uh, we went out. We didn't have children yet. Myself, my wife, my doctoral student who just defended his PhD, and he was bringing along a date. And the date in question was a graduate student in women's studies and postmodernism and so on. And so he calls me before we go out to dinner to kind of give me a heads up because he knows that, we might get into some difficult conversations. About halfway through the dinner, I turn to this lady and I say to her, I hear you're studying postmodernism. She goes, yes. I said, so there are no objective truths, right? There are no universal truths. She goes, no, there aren't any. I said, well, do you mind if I propose a universal truth and then we can discuss it? She said, yes. Go ahead. I said, is it not true that within Homo sapiens, within humans, only women bear children? And so she pauses, looks at me at what an idiot I must be. She goes, no, it's not true. I said, it's not true that only women bear children? How so? She said, well, because there is some Japanese tribe of some Japanese island where within their folkloric mythological realm, it is the men who bear children. So by you restricting it to the biological realm, that's how you keep us barefoot and pregnant. So now imagine this, Roseanne. Yeah, exactly. I see your face. Now imagine this. If I can't sit down with a woman who's getting a graduate degree at one of the top schools in Canada in 2002, and we can't agree on something as fundamentally obvious as women bear children in a sexually reproducing species, where can we go from there? And so that's why I've been standing on top of the mountain for decades now, screaming. Now, I'm glad that people are catching on, but why did you catch on now rather than 25 years ago when I was warning you? We could have saved ourselves a lot of headaches.
Well, don't you think it's all the same thing? It's to befuddle everybody.
Yeah.
So they're running around looking for information. Of course, you find fake information on the internet and everywhere as much as you do accurate, and you can't tell. And then 3 months later, something you thought everybody said was bullshit, it shows up in a credible source. So you can't tell, but it seems like to befuddle everybody, to trick everybody, to take people's time so that they take their eye off the real ball, which is they're stealing all our money. But
You're speaking to the guy who has a taxation system where I pay, once you add up all the taxes, about 70% of my earnings. So don't get me going on stealing my money, because that's probably the only thing in life that has brought me more misery than going through the Lebanese civil war.
Yeah, and it really tears at your conscience too, because I knew about USAID, and I said I tried to go to Marin County and tell all the Jews up there, the money you're giving to the Democrats is going to pay for Slay, to kill Jews. I mean, once you decode all the layers of bullshit, it's the same old imperialist uh, crap it's always been, isn't it?
I mean, yes, although I'd like to be a bit more charitable in that I think that
Okay.
some of the parasitic ideas are not necessarily willful mind control. And let me explain what I mean by that. So I argue in the parasitic mind that many of these parasitic ideas start off with a noble goal. But then, in the service of that noble goal, if we have to murder and rape truth,
Yeah.
then so be it. So, for example, equity feminism is a great idea. It basically says men and women should be treated equally under the law. Now, if that's the definition of feminism, all of us would say, yeah, sign me up. I'm a feminist. But then radical feminists come along and say, in the desire to squash the patriarchy, we need to now promulgate the idea that men and women are indistinguishable from one another. All differences between men and women must be due to social construction, because that will allow us to defeat the patriarchy more easily. And so, what started off as a nice idea and good objective gets killed, and hence the parasitic idea spreads, because so what if I murder truth? Same thing with transgender activism. All of us probably agree that, hey, if you want to be transgender, more power to you, live your life.
Yeah.
But that's not enough. We now have to impose on the rest of us the idea that men too can menstruate and that men too can bear children, because that's the only way that those
Well,
noble
because the women are saying they're men. That's what it's about.
exactly.
It's the trick. But the whole are women men and are men women thing is the same kind of fantasy as the whole concept of Palestine, as the whole concept of Monsanto, uh, the foods they make Americans eat, fake food, bullshit food, and none of the rest of the world has to eat it. But just the level of mind control that they, manipulate people like puppets on a string, to take up all their time so that their conscious minds, their creativity, anything they could be doing to better themselves is sidetracked into these ridiculous fake issues that have nothing to do with the price of butter
And
at all.
imagine this, Roseanne. So I've been a professor now for 31 years. Imagine when parents are sending their kids to universities that will charge 60, 70, 80,000 dollars, and you're
Mhm.
studying,
No.
lesbian dance therapy and postmodernism and feminist glaciology. I mean, if at least, I don't mind you study anything. You could study literature. I'm not saying you should only study, cancer research and neuroscience. You could study whatever you want, but as long as it intellectually enriches you, so that when you come out of, $400,000 of debt, you are a better person for it. But where do you go when you study postmodernism? It's going to lead you nowhere. So not only are you parasitizing the young kids' minds, you're also stealing the parents' hard-earned money, because you
Yeah.
are failing in your fiduciary responsibility to actually intellectually enrich those kids. So that's why I've
And
always
then Biden gives them all a, get out of jail free card and makes me, the American taxpayer, pay for them to basically go to college to go out and take strikes to say kill all the Jews. I swear.
exactly. By the way, uh, so I know that you follow all of the crazy anti-Semitism that's happening at American universities. My home university in Montreal makes
Oh, worse.
it. I mean, orders of magnitude worse. So my university 20 years ago, Roseanne, was
Mhm.
called Gaza University. So this
Oh
is
my God.
Oh, no. So this is why, by the way, you may or may not know this. I took a leave from my home university. I'm currently a
Oh,
visiting professor at a Michigan university, uh,
oh.
precisely because someone of my profile, who's as publicly open about all the positions I take, it's become nearly impossible for me to go to campus. Now, imagine that this is not happening in Yemen and in Lahore, Pakistan. This is happening in
Well, it
Canada.
already happened there. I mean, the only place it didn't was America, so we're next.
In Canada.
So you're
And
not you
well,
hold
they already took Canada, for crying out loud. They got Canada.
so
That's why I hope it does become the 51st state. I hope Trump bankrupts that whole thing.
do you hold out any optimism for us up your neighborly northern cousins, or are we doomed?
I want to go into this next subject because I'm like, the only hope we have in this world for all of us who are critical thinkers and love actual history, not fake rewritten history by, whatever they are that went to them colleges that just accept bullshit as fact. Um, which that is something beyond suicidal empathy. I just say it's an addiction to bullshit. They rather have their bullshit like heroin every day and they put it above the lives of their own children. Their addiction to bullshit is such that it's just demonic.
But the question is, why are they susceptible to the bullshit? And I think it's because, going back to suicidal empathy, because they have been taught that the Jew, so if we're going to talk about that region, the Jew is always the oppressor.
Always. Everything's our fault.
So I'll tell you a great story, by the way. And I mentioned it, well, I discussed it in my forthcoming book, and I discussed it a few days ago when Douglas Murray came on my show.
I saw that. It was great.
Oh, great. I'm glad you enjoyed it. So forgive me if the story is going to be repetitive for you, but some of your listeners might not know it. So I put out on social media, Roseanne, I said, here's a photo of 20 rapists in a town in England. It's called Huddersfield, but there are many of these towns. These are the British grooming gangs, which are almost exclusively Pakistani Muslim men. And so I said, so I put this photo, and their names were listed. So it's, Muhammad this, Ahmad this, Hussein that. And so sarcastically, and I know that you're a very sarcastic person, so you'll appreciate this, I said, I'm not smart enough to know what is the common theme across Muhammad, 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 Muhammad. Could somebody help me out? Now, without missing a beat, I receive a torrent of responses, not sarcastic responses, not facetious responses, where people said, yes, you know who's to blame for those grooming gangs? Are you ready, Roseanne? It's the Jews.
Yep.
Of course it is. Because the Jews let all the immigrants in.
Yes, exactly.
Of course.
So sure, the 3 Muhammads gang raped your beautiful young 12-year-old, but the real culprits are Mordecai and Moses. So 3 Muhammad equals Mordecai. So how could
it's a code. I think it's a code too. Like, I think every time they say Jews run the world and this and that, it's a code for the real deal. You ready?
I'm ready.
Qatar and Switzerland. That's what it is. The Muslim Brotherhood in Qatar and all their money that they launder through Switzerland to come up with their NGOs to brainwash Americans, from owning all the media, from, maybe making ABC fire me because I said Muslim Brotherhood, to, everything else in America, to everything, TikTok, YouTube. When I go anywhere and write the words Muslim Brotherhood, I'm banned immediately. We're under some heavy duty mind control, and it's all Swiss banks, the neutrality. It's all bullshit, and of course they're going to blame the Jews. That's all they do to keep the mirror going. So them.
Are you familiar? This is not only the Muslim Brotherhood who said this, but certainly they did. Many of these Islamic leaders have said that we are going to conquer the West in one of 3 ways. And so I want your listeners to listen to this carefully. And they say it very brazenly and very openly. Number one. Sorry?
I said they don't hide it. Sorry.
Exactly. So, number one, we're going to conquer the West through the womb of our women, which is
That's
exactly
right.
right. Right. Number two, we're going to conquer the West through hijra. Hijra is the Arabic word for immigration, migration. And of course, we've got the suicidally empathetic reflex to let in millions of people who don't share our values. And number three, which is arguably the one that they've been most successful at, we are going to use your miserable freedoms against you.
Against you.
That's it. But what do you mean you're deporting me? All I do all day at the Columbia campus is rail for the end of the Jews and for the destruction of the United States. I'm just a poor graduate student. Why are you getting rid of me? Freedom of speech. And then all of my idiotic colleagues, and they're called professors, don't
Yeah.
side with the Trump administration to get rid of this cancerous guy.
No,
He's
they
a
love it.
he's a poor guy who's only expressing his beautiful freedom of speech.
And what also infuriates me is they all go, they pay everybody in our media too. Come on, let's be real. They got all the money in the world. They give this country about maybe 10,000 times more money to buy influence than APAC could ever dream of. And all they do is APAC, 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 like parrots, because they don't want, and all the Jews that they say, oh, see the Jews, all of them are working for the friggin' Muslim Brotherhood media
Yep.
cartel. I mean, and I'm sick of it. I'm sick about that they're working for them. They want jobs that bad, but they're selling America down the river with their liberal bullshit, which isn't liberal at all. I used to be a liberal, so I know it isn't liberal bullshit. It's Islamic bullshit.
So
I'll
what do you
probably get
think?
that on me after this, but
What do
I
you
don't give
think?
it.
What do you think about? Are you familiar with the project Epic City in Texas?
Yeah, we've
Oh
been
yeah,
talking
I
about
was on that as soon as I heard. I was on the phone. Believe me, I'm an old, bitter, nosy Jewish woman. I'm 72. It's my right, God, to do what God above says to do. And so I called everybody. I'm like, are you shitting me that you let this through? Are you shitting me? You better fix it. Because I have everybody's phone number because I'm nosy and I can get anybody on the phone. And I did for 2 weeks sit there. You better make Sharia law illegal in Texas right away and do something about it. I mean, they are so smart. I mean, Jews will go around these days. Oh, we are so smart with our pager, this and that. Well, they've already taken over America while you were
Mhm.
sitting there telling everybody how smart you are
Yeah.
and talking about conservative rather than liberal Judaism on TV. Who gives a shit? I'm
I,
sick of it. Excuse me.
what do you think about the? So I called the. Remember earlier I mentioned the wood cricket that is parasitized by the hairworm, and so now I've introduced a term which I think you'll get. I call them wood cricket Jews. So these are the Jews that put up the sign that says Jews for Palestine, Jews for
Absolutely.
Hamas.
That's right. Absolutely.
Do you come across a lot of these in your social circle?
Mm-mm.
I did in my life, and I ran for my life because I read the Bible. I read Torah, and Torah says the biggest enemy of the Jews are the Erev Rav, the ones that were in the house of Pharaoh. That do they do Babylonian black magic. They got nothing to do with Judaism. They wear goats' heads for Christ's sake. That's what they do. And it's all about the scapegoat. And we won't even go into European history. But anyway, they always sell us out. And they are, so involved in the Israeli government. I won't even go into that either. But no, they should not be our spokespeople. I think Jews who were, I just had Tal
All right.
uh, Iran on here, and we said Jews who originate from the Middle East and were driven from their homes should be the only spokespeople now in America when they're talking about Israel or any other subject that entails anything about Jews or Jewish history, because these guys have rewritten it all or forgotten. They don't even know what they're talking about as it applies to us living in the world and staying living right now. The people from all Arab states, all Jews have been nakbud, and they're of thousands of years assumed, and they had to go to Israel. They had no other place. The Jews
So,
of Yemen,
so, so you mean,
Iraq.
so you mean the course that you and I took together at Oberlin about Islamic history, where the Muslim countries were terribly loving and revered the Jews? That's not true.
Oh, no, in fact, when Hitler admired them so much because they made Jews wear the yellow star in the Middle Ages to walk
Exactly.
down the street. They had to walk in the middle of the street where the sewage ran. They weren't allowed up on the sidewalk because they weren't chosen. They were not the chosen people. And I'm just sick of it. I'm so sick of the lies. But I mean, they really have these people who they pay. I'm sure they're paid because you can tell they don't passionately believe anything. They just spout, parrot, and but they're so smart the way they did it, using our hospitality against us.
We will
And
use
getting women to do it is what pisses me off so
as
bad.
I said, we will use your miserable freedoms against you, right? That's exactly what they've done. By the way,
And don't they say that the West, that they look upon the West as a woman to be screwed, mounted?
that's literally coming from me. I'm the one who raised it. So
I
this
know.
this comes from conversations that I've had with, because Arabic is my mother tongue, where they literally say exactly. I'm glad you raised this. The West is a woman to be mounted, the exact translation. And so imagine how. So every time the West engages in generosity, compassion, hospitality, what their mind is seeing: weakness, weakness, weakness. So this is what I call a lack of a cultural theory of mind. Remember earlier I talked about theory of mind, which is
Mhm.
I need to put myself in your mind to be able to have a meaningful conversation. Well, the West doesn't have cultural theory of mind, meaning that they presume that the noble virtues that they express to the other will be fully appreciated and reciprocated. But that's not how it's viewed by the Middle East. It's viewed as weakness. And this is why, I mean, even as I'm a Canadian, right? So I don't have officially a dog in the fight in terms of Donald Trump or not. But the reason why I appreciate Donald Trump so much, among many reasons, is that he speaks the Middle Eastern language.
Yes, he
Even though,
does.
right, he doesn't speak Arabic, but he understands the dynamics of geopolitics, which is,
Yeah,
yes.
he goes, if you don't do it, we're going to kill you.
Mhm.
Do you remember the famous anecdote? I can't remember who said it, where he was negotiating with some Taliban guy and he sent the photo of where his house is or something. Now that's
Yeah,
some
that's in the
gangster stuff
pocket.
right there.
But it is gangster. I mean, it is gangster to control your women like that, and I mean that is about as gangster as it gets. And they are very gangster, and they're very imperialist. I mean, they are imperialist as hell, and they are, they have they believe they are superior to everyone on Earth, and I mean, they believe their religion is the only religion, which Christians do too, but they give you, a little out if you're a Jew. Oh, someday you'll see the light, and, before you die, whatever. But they're like, no, no Jews, sorry.
So
You
let me
guys,
give you let me
you're
give
an
you
embarrassment to us.
yeah, so I'll give you a couple of passages, I mean, or elements from the Quran. And so there are three elements to Islamic theology. There's the Quran, then there is the Hadith, which is sort of the deeds and sayings of Muhammad, and then there's the Sirah, which is the biography of Muhammad. And so that's, if you like, the trilogy. Okay, and so a couple of things that some of your listeners might appreciate. Number one, whenever a Islamic apologist or a Westerner apologizing on behalf of Islam uses the following, be careful. So for
Okay.
example, they'll quote something that says, "Hey, you have your religion, I have mine." Oh, that seems peaceful, yes. But then there's another passage that says, "Kill, kill, kill everything in sight." Well, how could it be? How could it have both? So here we need to go to a concept called abrogation. So Muhammad had two periods of proselytizing. He had the Meccan period and the Medinan period. When he was in Mecca, he spent many, many years and he wasn't able to attract many adherents, something like 150. He actually did preach a message of peace. That's the early part in the Quran, the
That's
Meccan
when he
period.
had the Jewish wife.
Exactly. Later, he moves to Medina. As a good marketer, he repositions his message to be kill, 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 take their women, and so on. Well, now a lot of guys say, hey, I want to sign up for that. Suddenly, the religion explodes. Now there's a problem theologically. How could the Quran have two contradictory statements? One that says, you have your religion, I have mine. The other one says, everybody has to become Muslim. Well, abrogation is whenever you have two contradictory statements in the Quran, the later one abrogates the earlier one. It nullifies it. So every single time you get an Islamic apologist going on CNN telling you all this bullshit, most Westerners go, oh, wow, so it really is peaceful. And I'm sitting there pulling my hair and I'm saying, it's complete bullshit.
It is complete bullshit. Well, I mean, and they forgot all about Salman Rushdie.
Yes.
They totally forgot all about him, huh?
Salman Rushdie, which, by the way, I've always thought, I always use the term honey badger, right? For people who are, fierce and fight for their ideals. Salman Rushdie has been a honey badger since the 80s when the fatwa was first put out on him. So imagine if all of the cowardly Western people, and certainly most professors are astoundingly cowardly. Imagine if they had an ounce of his courage, we'd be in a much better spot.
We absolutely would. What do you think of, of course, I want to talk about a million things with you. But what about Marshall McLuhan and the medium being the message? Where are you at with the message and how we get it through the media?
Well, he was Canadian, by the way. I don't know if you know this. That's a bit of an academic sort of game. So which specific part are you?
Well, just when I read about you, understanding like kind of advertising and marketing and
I see
how to get influence,
yes.
how to influence, but like to actually, instead of bullshit, because I think of this all the time when I'm writing, how to get in an uplifting thing for people, an uplifting message through the crooked, horrible media.
So, I'll answer it in two ways, which relate to the message versus the medium in a sense. Number one, very early in my public engagement, I realized that I had an endless number of tools that I can use to spread my message, whether it be start my own channel well before any other professor had ever thought, whether it was to go on Joe Rogan when all of my haughty, highfalutin colleagues thought, how dare you speak to mere mortals, right? We are in the ivory tower. And so very quickly I learned or realized that any medium that I can use in the spread of hopefully good ideas over bad ideas, I was going to sign up for it. And so I never had, and to that point, Roseanne Barr would have never heard of Gad Saad had I restricted my engagement to only speaking to fellow professors via peer-reviewed journals, right? The fight is too important to only speak to the ivory tower folks. So that's number one. But the second point I think will also resonate with you. You're obviously, a legendary comedian. I use any persuasion technique in order to change hearts and minds. So I use sarcasm, I use satire, I use humor. Now, sometimes some imbeciles will write to me and say, well, Professor Saad, aren't you losing some of your professorial thing by, wearing a pink wig? I say, absolutely not. When I need to be professorial, when I'm giving a lecture at Stanford, I can do that. But when I'm trying to convince the average person, and if I can use humor to do so, I'm big enough to also do that. So all bets are off when I'm trying to get into your brain and hopefully give you a mind vaccine.
What is the mind vaccine?
Well, so there are several ways to do it. One, now this I'm going to get a bit technical, so please be patient with me as I explain it. So let's suppose so in chapter 7 of the parasitic mind, I have a chapter that I discuss how to seek truth. So if I
Yeah.
want to convince others of the veracity of my position, how can I go about doing that? And so therefore, how can I inoculate you against the bullshit that you're believing? Okay. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to build what I call a nomological network of cumulative evidence. I know it's a mouthful, so I'm going to break it down. So let's suppose you come to me and say toy preferences are socially constructed, meaning little boys prefer to play with trucks and little girls prefer to play with dolls because of their sexist parents. And I want to actually prove to you that no, there is a biological universal reason for why these sex specific toy preferences exist. How would I go about doing that? So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to build a network of evidence for you across cultures, across time periods, across species, all of which point to the veracity of my position. So let me demonstrate how. I can bring you data from vervet monkeys, rhesus monkeys, and chimpanzees showing you that they have the exact same toy preferences as human infants. I can bring you data from developmental psychology showing you that little infants who are too young yet to be socialized, by definition, are already exhibiting the sex-specific toy preferences. I can take you to nomadic tribes in sub-Saharan Africa, showing you that these toy preferences are not only in the West, they happen everywhere around the world in exactly the same way. I'll just give you one more example. I can get you data from 2,500 years ago in ancient Greece and ancient Rome, where people have done analyses on funerary monuments where children are depicted. They're depicted playing with the exact same toys as we have today. So what have I done? I have triangulated many lines of evidence that hopefully gives you a tsunami of evidence. Now, here is where my mind vaccine fails. The only way I could give you that mind vaccine is if you're willing to at least come to the station to hear out my presenting you the data. If you go la 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 from the start, in other words, to use the vaccine analogy, I could only give you the vaccine against measles if you show up to the clinic. If you don't show up to the clinic, I can never give you the vaccine. So the challenge is to get people to have the humility to at least allow me to give you the vaccine, and then I could flip you. The problem is many people don't even wish to engage me, and therefore I could never give them a vaccine. Does that make
Well,
sense?
I think also what you're saying, and I've been saying it too, is a new kind of person I think is coming in, into the world, and that person is going to be much more intelligent than we are, and is only going to rely on fact and data, no superstition, no, they'll love their myths, they'll love their legends, but they won't rely on superstition just because everybody else did before them.
Although I like your thinking, but remember I mentioned earlier that we are both a thinking and feeling animal.
Yeah,
The difficulty in what you're talking about is that oftentimes people invoke the wrong system at the wrong time. So, for example, when I'm walking down a dark alley to take a shortcut to get home and I see four young men loitering, I will get an emotional response. I will get a fear based response, which makes perfect evolutionary sense. Yes. So,
yes,
in that sense, my feeling system is beneficial to me. On the other hand, if I am choosing which president should lead us, I should not be using my emotional system. I should be using my cognitive system. So I think
that's
that
right.
so the difficulty in what you're saying, which is just rely on facts and data, is
Well, I
different.
was talking about government. I was
Oh, I
meaning
see.
government.
Okay.
But yeah, I totally agree with you there.
And by the way, I want to.
I don't want to see people elected by manipulating people's fears.
So I want to. So imagine that this Have you ever seen my getting drunk by the cork of the wine bottle routine? Do you know this?
No.
No.
Get ready. So this is a memory stick, but
Yeah.
imagine for a second that it was the cork of a wine bottle. Yes?
Yeah.
So one of the things that I love about being able to speak several languages is that there are expressions in one language that don't exist in another language, but that really are very powerful in describing something. So there's an expression in Arabic which says getting drunk simply by smelling the cork of the wine bottle, which basically means that you are of such weak constituency that it doesn't actually take you to drink the wine bottle to get drunk. You just take a whiff and you're already, getting drunk. Now, I use this principle exactly to what we're talking about. So look, now I'm going to get drunk by smelling the cork of Barack Obama. You ready, Roseanne? Okay,
Uh-huh.
look, I'm drunk. He's so tall, he's thin, he's got a magnificent, radiant smile, he's got a mellifluous voice. At no point did I say anything about his fiscal policy or his immigration policy. I just got drunk by simply whiffing the aura of Barack Obama. On the other hand, look, now I'm going to get drunk in the reverse sense by smelling Donald Trump. He's disgusting. He's vile. He's an ogre. He's vulgar. He speaks like a brawler from Queens, right? And so in this case, what's happening, and it happens to all of my professorial colleagues that are supposed to be intelligent, they're letting their affective system, their emotional system, drive the most important decision they'll ever make, which is which leader should lead us. Because when I ask them, when I put them down and I go through the Socratic process and I say, are you for freedom of speech? Yes, of course. Well, who do you think supports more freedom of speech? This party or that party? You're for science, yes? Is it scientific to say that men too can menstruate? Is that a scientific fact or is that a wrong? So oftentimes they will completely agree with every single position that Donald Trump espouses, but when they smell the cork, he's disgusting.
Yeah.
It's mind control.
Mm-hmm.
It's to destroy the middle, which is, the common sense, the vast middle. They've managed to, both extremes have managed to disenfranchise the vast middle. That's really, but that's how they do it, right? And then they joined up with the Marxists. They do it too. It's to just cause a color revolution and bring in the new meaning. What do you think when the Pope died? Were you sad? I mean, we're all sad that a guy died.
Look, in Suicidal Empathy, I have a section where I take some of the quotes that he has given as a manifestation of suicidal empathy regarding Islamic immigration to Europe, right? And he starts kissing the feet of the noble Muslim. Look, I'm all for Christian compassion and charity and kindness. It shouldn't be suicidal, though, right? And so while I appreciate some of his attempts to, quote, modernize the church and so on, I think that he is a prime exemplar of suicidal empathy. So I'm actually hopeful, although I don't know if it'll happen. There is a prospective pope. I'm probably, you know who I'm talking about, the African. Do you know Robert? I can't remember his last name. Sarah, maybe, or he's a guy who's very clear about what Islam poses in terms of a threat to the West, and he speaks very openly about it. I wouldn't mind seeing him as the next pope, but as you know, it's mysterious what happens in that conclave, so we'll have to wait and see.
It's mysterious how the Vatican banks are also in Switzerland, right? Anyway, did you see he put the keffiyeh on the
yes,
in the trash?
Yes.
That was a good one. I almost shit myself. For a while, I thought he was following me around because I was there in Jerusalem, and he shows up. And he goes over there and, puts up the thing on the wall. Remember he did that, the whole, oh my God, I just thought that
again,
guy.
it comes from this idea of, turn the other cheek, show kindness, love your enemy. Look, that's all fine and well, as long as you could expect the other party to reciprocate in kind. So not to get too professorial here, but one of the most fundamental Darwinian mechanisms that drives our social system is reciprocity. We know, right? An eye for an eye. We know the golden rule. Those things have stood the test of time because they actually speaks to an evolutionary reality, which, by the way, other primates, for example, reciprocal grooming, you've probably seen it on a National Geographic episode, right? I can't get to, I'm speaking now, let's say I'm a baboon. I can't get to some of the parasites that are in my back. So I will give you my back. You will pick at the parasites with the understanding that then there'll be reciprocity. If
Right.
if I do it to you, if I literally scratch your back and you don't reciprocate, then you're a social cheat and you're going to be ostracized from the band. That oils our social system. So when you have a unidirectional, asymmetric compassion from one group to the other without ever an expectation of reciprocity, you don't need fancy Professor Saad to tell you you're going to run into trouble.
Well
And
said.
so that leads me to say, about having double standards, because they've really groomed it into us to have double standards when it comes to the Jewish state. It is unbelievable, their double standards of war. And I mean, on October 8th, they were in the streets of New York condemning Israel.
It's just unbelievable, right? I mean, the Israelis should not, by the way, as you, I'm sure you know this, right? They put out flyers, they warn you. I mean, they do what no other military force has ever done. I know some Israeli military people. A lot of my family lives in Israel. So
Mine too.
exactly. So and people now facetiously say, "Oh, the most moral army." They are the most moral military because they could literally in 15 seconds. I appeared on Joe Rogan recently where I said, if it were the case that Israel wanted to genocide the Palestinians, do you know how many seconds it would take to achieve that? It would take 15 seconds, right? The fact by the way, this is the first genocide ever, as you know, where you've had a five-fold increase in the population.
I know, Jews are bad at it.
The Jews suck at genocide. They're very good at getting genocide, not as good as committing genocide. But yet I can't go to my campus downtown Montreal because there are signs everywhere saying, you're a baby killer, you're a Zionist, and so on. The world is mad, Roseanne.
Yeah.
What are we going to do about it?
Well, we're going to keep talking. We're going to keep hopefully speaking out. You're doing your part. Obviously, you've got a huge platform. You lost a lot in doing it, but guess what? Most people don't have your courage, Roseanne. Let me tell you what the typical email I get from thousands and thousands of people, including professors. You ready? Dear Professor Saad, a bunch of compliments, 5 paragraphs of compliments. Now here's the last line. You ready? If you choose to read this letter on your show, please don't mention my name. Yeah. So then I write back to them, dear so-and-so, thank you very much for your lovely words. Don't you think that the last line of your email is exactly why we are currently in the problem we're facing? So that's the problem, Roseanne, is that most people are actually on our side, but they're afraid of their shadow, and none more so than academics. You would think in academia, we're protected by tenure, right? The whole point of tenure is so that you can be emboldened and courageous to speak your mind without having the threat of being fired. Yet I've never met a more cowardly, castrated group than professors. It's sickening.
It's sickening how many, well, speaking of castrated, oh God, we won't even go into it. But, it really, they're such fake intellectuals. That's what gets me, is they're just phony. They're not intellectuals.
No. As a matter of fact, one of the things that has frustrated me the most in my academic career, Roseanne, so I thought, so my sort of romance of academia was that my children would grow up at Shabbat dinner, and I've invited all my colleagues, and one day we're talking about art history, the next day we're talking about the history of the papacy, and the next, And the reality is that most of my academic colleagues, while they are great in the hyper specialized fields that they are specialists in, they're completely stay in your lane people. Whereas a
Yep.
Yeah.
real intellect is able to have a meaningful conversation with Roseanne Barr one day, with Joe Rogan the next day, with an art historian. And I mean, if I may, not to forgive me, not to toot my own horn, but the reason why I think I was able to achieve the platform that I have achieved is because I'm not elitist, I'm not arrogant. I get a lot more of a kick out of a trucker writing to me telling me, hey, you know what? You keep me sane. I listen to your show when I'm doing the run from this place to this place. That makes me happier than receiving an email from a colleague at Stanford telling me how great I am. Because if I can
Well,
reach,
it should make you happier because those people are way smarter, which I've known my whole life.
Yep.
Way smarter, way more actually empathetic because they live a real life. They don't live an artificial life of I don't know. They're handpicked, just like they did it in Germany. First, they took over the campuses with their fake science, reading people's head shapes. For God's sake, that was a good one.
yes,
But I mean, they're just all fake.
look at that profile. Look at that Jewish profile.
It kind of looks like those statues of Caesar. You ever look at them? I go, I didn't know he was Jewish. Caesar there.
There you go. There you go.
You know what I think of you though? I think of you, and I just want to say this. I know we're coming into well, anyway. Um, you studied math too,
I
which
did.
I love math. I love mathematics, and everything you were saying, I sort of put it together, and I want to ask you this. You, to me, you are a mystic. What do
Oh,
you
you're
think
kind.
of me saying that to
It's
you?
not for me to say you're very kind, but speaking of math, this is the book that I'm currently reading, and here is the marker. Fermat's last theorem. Are you familiar with this?
Mm-mm.
No, what is it?
So Fermat's last theorem was a theorem that Fermat, who was a French mathematician about 300 plus years ago, had proposed, which for hundreds of years, all of the greatest mathematical minds have not been able to solve. And then in the mid 90s, it was finally solved by Sir Andrew Wiles, a professor of mathematics at Princeton. And so the book that I'm currently reading recounts the story of all of the people who tried and failed until this guy came along. So check that out.
Oh, I will. That's fascinating subject matter to me.
How did you
I,
get interested in mathematics?
huh?
How did you like? What was the catalyst that got you interested in mathematics?
I just always was obsessed with numbers as a
Oh wow!
kid. Like when people would be talking, I'd be counting how many words they were saying on my fingers, how many words they were saying on my finger, like just always. And then,
OCD.
you know,
OCD.
yeah, but I like math, and studying Judaism deeply,
Right.
that kind of compounded it. But then when you get into like really studying about mathematics, you can see it's so mystical. I mean, the numbers themselves are just so mystical. They have uh, such a great story to tell if we could find the language.
You know, it's funny that you say this because I remember when I was a math student, I would go out with this other friend of mine who was studying communication. He wasn't a math major. And I remember, so this is going, what, probably 85, 86, where you know, I'm dating myself. Uh, and I remember I used to tell him, I love math not only because it is so pure, right? There is no impurity within that
Yeah,
system.
no room for bullshit.
There's no room for bullshit. It caters to my OCD. It caters to my sort of perfectionism. But then I said something which kind of speaks to what you're talking about, sort of with Jewish mysticism. I said, it is the language of God. It is the language of divinity. Because,
Yeah.
so take, for example, prime numbers, right? It's very
Yes.
easy. to define what is a prime number, right? It's a number that can only be divided by one or itself. And yet, we don't have a formula that allows us to definitively know when we should expect the next prime. Right now, the only way you could find what the next prime is to use brute force with supercomputers, right? So we've come up now with what is the biggest prime ever, but it wasn't solved through a mathematical equation. It was solved just through brute force. So how could it be that we understand the definition of a prime number so clearly? We can explain it to a 7-year-old, and yet we don't know how to predict when prime numbers will occur. And so it really has an element of mysticism to it. So I completely get you.
Yeah, and like getting into well, I'll just say this one, but like there's this guy that writes these great books. I can't remember his name or any name of the books, but I'll mention it later. But he broke down the Torah code into mathematical language, which I have somewhere, maybe not in this house, my other house in Hawaii, but it broke down the prayers into sound waves too, with on computer with mathematical formulations that turned them into sound waves and then to colors. And I have the painting of it.
Wow.
So yeah, right? Isn't that cool?
That is very cool.
I'll take a picture of it and send it to you.
Please do.
But yeah, isn't it great to be able to think above the fray? I wish more people would be brave enough to think outside of the box that they want us to be in.
I hear you, and I mean, listen, you're probably. I mean, you kindly shared some very sweet words about me. Let me reciprocate. Uh,
Oh, I
with
love
it, how many out open conservatives do we have in Hollywood? I'll mention a few, and then you'll add, because you're obviously much more of an expert in that ecosystem. John Voight, Clint Eastwood, Rob Schneider, who, by the way, was on my show recently. What a delight that guy is.
Yeah, it's so cool.
You, Mel Gibson. Who am I missing of the big ones?
Dang, I don't know. I don't know it.
James Woods, but
James Woods, of course.
Yeah.
But I mean,
Kevin Sorbo.
yeah,
Kevin Sorbo,
But,
Dean Cain.
there's a ton of them that don't say anything.
the
That's
closet there.
But that's my point, right? The fact that there are so few that have said, "Look, I don't care. I know it's going to affect my career. I know I'm not."
Mike Tyson, Sylvester Stallone, people
Oh,
I've seen.
They were all scared. A lot of them were scared. But anyway, I know your point.
So yeah, so I mean, do you feel that there's going to be an autocorrection towards more the center, if not the right, in Hollywood, or is that ecosystem forevermore doomed to be ultra progressive?
Yeah, it's completely doomed. I mean, the doom was spelled out clearly when they gave Hamas a fucking Academy Award. I was like, it's doomed. I mean, it was already doomed to me because I know a lot that if I ever told it, people would go, "You're lying." So I don't even bother. But yeah, that to me, that was the kiss of death. I mean, and that it's just the kiss of death. Uh, it's like the heart and soul of it is dead.
Do you? I mean, do you care at this point that you may have been blackballed, or are you past that stage where your public engagement, how we're doing now, is more important to you than what you might have lost in your entertainment career?
Well, I say I'm black and white, bald. I'm both. But at the time where I decided that I had to drop a bomb and I knew it was going to kill me, but it was like, hey, all these people get up. I was number one at the time, and all these people get up for their Hollywood acceptance speech and thank Hamas and Satan or whoever they want. But so it was my time, and it was just before the midterms 2018 elections. And so I said, America needs to know about the Muslim Brotherhood, about Valerie Jarrett, and ABC and their connection, Obama, Susan Rice, and I'm dropping that bomb, and it's going to take me down. But you know, it's got to happen because we can't lose America. But I did not at that time realize how far gone it was. And I don't know if it can come back. Of course, I pray it every day. I pray, and with a lot of people too who do know and who also pray that we can stop it this year, because I think it's coming and it's going to be bad. But with enough people being aware and waking up and seeing outside of this media box that they have us all chained to, and getting some real fact and data. I mean, I don't know, maybe with God's help. I mean, only God can do it, I think.
Amen. Do you get any of the folks who are not openly on your side, but who are from the industry, sort of send you the email similar to the one that I mentioned earlier? Please don't mention my name. Do you get a lot of those, or have all of your former colleagues disappeared from your Rolodex, so to speak?
Uh, yeah, I just kind of left it behind because, that's one good thing about, when we talk about being conditioned in the mind. That's one thing I think about us Jews. We know how to cut our losses and move on and flee sometimes. But yeah, I don't stay attached to things when I see how they work and find them not good. I run.
Well, thank you for being such a honey badger. If only we can bottle that courage and sell it.
You have to do it. I mean, and your courage too. I mean, you have an intellectual ferocity, and it is so wonderful to me to be able to see you bring it down. Because I try as a comic, you have to bring all these lofty thoughts down into a joke, or but to see you bring them down into a plain language thing is just wonderful to watch, and I'm a real fan of that. And I was going to say, when God created a being, this is what Torah says, and of course you know this, he created a, a thinking, feeling, speaking being. And that we have a chance to speak truth to people that they can hear, hopefully, that they want to hear, to get the vaccine there. I am so honored to have you come on my show today. And
Likewise, I wish we could have. I know that I was speaking with your son about doing it in person. If only you guys had reached out about 2 months ago. I
You know,
was actually in the area, so hopefully next time it'll
you'll
be
be
in
here.
person.
We
And
will
we'll
make
bring,
sure you're here.
we'll
yeah,
bring
and I also want to talk to you about, look at my hair, it's horrible.
you're
Not
gorgeous.
not that. I would like to talk about the message. I'm giving you the last word because you got, with Marshall McLuhan in mind and all of that, because I studied all that before I went to TV because I loved it. I loved the power of mass media and all of that. I didn't foresee that it would be to glorify idiocy, but of course it did.
Well,
But
go ahead.
what is the thing here's your last word.
Yes, sir.
That's it.
My
I love
last
you
word.
calling me sir. Everybody's been calling me sir
I
this
don't know.
last
I can't.
week.
I
I
can't, I
love
don't know. I don't want to presume whether you're male or female. I don't think.
you shouldn't.
But in all seriousness, look, right here in this conversation, we have someone who broke the mold in the entertainment industry, another person who did it in academia. And so I implore people to not diffuse responsibility onto others, right? Yes, you may not have Roseanne Barr's reach, you may not have Joe Rogan's podcast, you may not be a professor. It doesn't matter. You can still, when your professor says something insane in the classroom, raise your hand and politely challenge them. When you're out at a bar and your friend says something that you disagree with, take this opportunity to engage them politely, nicely. But don't always use the excuse, I don't want to do it because, and then fill in the blank. There's always an excuse for why it shouldn't be you who speaks out, and it should be others that put their necks on the line. Don't be that person. I implore you to be courageous. Be like Roseanne Barr. Such a pleasure to talk to you, and I can't wait to do it again.
Me too. God bless you.
Thank you, guys. Cheers.
Oh, you see, my patience is growing thin.